welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on January 7th, 2025. Still weird. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. A little behind the scenes, but this is the first time we've seen Scott since before the holidays. So, Scott, how's it going, man? How'd everything go?
I mean, you two personally, but we did bank a couple before I went on vacation.
I think I've seen Nick Pollack more recently than I've seen Scott.
Actually. That is true, actually. You came to my ugly Christmas sweater party.
Yeah, Nick Pollack is here. So I love
ruining your intro, Frank.
It's all good. We were going to get there eventually. Nick Pollack is here on the podcast.
What's going on?
What's going on, Nick? How you doing, buddy?
I'm great. I'm engaged. So this is weird. I'm finally joining the likes of you guys.
Here we go. I guess you technically don't have.
You don't have one yet.
I don't have mine yet.
You don't get a ring.
Here's my tip.
A month or so.
You're gonna want to play with it. You're going to want to play with the ring. And I made the mistake. We went to Washington, D.C. for our honeymoon. We were in one of the museums, and I took it off and started fiddling with it and dropped it. And it like careened down every single stair like a cartoon.
Oh my God.
As I'm scrambling past it, and I look back at my wife, and she's just like, I'm going to kill you. So don't do that.
It's funny, as you went into don't play with your ring. If you watch the video, I am actively playing with my ring while you start into that.
You do it constantly, yeah.
I'm thinking like a really dark blue ring. I don't like gold. It's too shiny and everything. But that's not what we're talking about today. I'm just so happy to be here with you talking about baseball, forgetting about all that stuff. You got to talk about pitching. Let's do it.
That's exactly right.
I love that, like, fresh off my longest vacation of the year, I got to go toe-to-toe with Nick Pollack.
Let's go.
No easing me in. Like, I'm probably a little bit rusty.
Scott, it's not toe-to-toe. Who were the two guys last year and Paul Sporer who were in on Cole Reagan's last year?
So that would be three guys.
Right?
It was us, though.
It was us.
It was
right?
us.
It's not toe-to-toe. It's
no toe-to-toe.
The same thing.
We're shoulder to shoulder.
There it is.
There you go. We'll see. We'll see if that remains the case later on in the show, because we do have some pitchers that Nick is either higher or lower on versus early ADP. And we'll be talking about all things pitching, the state of pitching, which stats to use when analyzing pitching. And so that's why we brought on Nick Pollack. He's from Pitcher List. So go to his website, check everything out, pitcherlist.com. You can follow him at PitcherList on X. You can follow him at nickpollack.pitcherlist.com on Blue Sky as well, if you are over there.
Love how those Blue Sky handles just roll right off the tongue.
We also have the Pitcher List one. So, like, we've actually separated it out. It's me and Blue Sky, and then we have the Pitcher List Media one, too. So
I couldn't figure out a better way to, like, promote someone's Blue Sky, so I guess you just have to read everything off. Let's get right into things. And the overall pitching landscape, it bounced back in 2024. Offense was up in 2023. You know, things have kind of been a little bit volatile the past couple of years, where one year it's like offense is up, the next year pitching is up, and we don't know which baseball they're using and all this fun stuff. But based on the most recent results, it was a better season for pitching in 2024. The problem for fantasy is that pitchers are getting hurt at an alarming rate, and a lot of the highly ranked names that we've seen are either coming back from injury or just had a huge jump in innings year over year. So, for example, Garrett, Crochet, Cole Reagans, Michael King all saw huge innings jumps from 23 to 24. And then we have Jacob deGrom. We have Shane McClanahan. We have Sandy Alcantara all coming back from either a first or second Tommy John surgery for some of those guys. And there are other pitchers like Kodai Senga's coming
Shohei
Ohtani. Yeah, so lots of moving parts. Nick, what's your overall take on the state of pitching right now for fantasy?
Well, oh man, how long do you have? No, I'll make this very quick. Looking at ADP so far just from NFBC, there are many pitchers at 300 with relative value of last year, they're around 200. Mm-hmm. So what that tells me is that you can take a lot more chances in 12-teamers this year because there are going to be so many to choose from who won't get drafted. And then there's the other side of it, also emphasizing that point, that if you drafted players last year, you would have remembered, wait, guys like Garrett Cole, the standard of consistency and being healthy, was hurt for a long period of time. So many guys just all of a sudden fell off and got injured. And the argument can go both ways of, oh, he's thrown too many innings, so he's going to get hurt now. Oh, he's thrown too few innings, he's going to get hurt now. And then you realize we have no idea who's going to get hurt. So putting weight on the stable guys who are going to get me my innings, I know that's going to happen, versus I don't know, they might get hurt. Well, Chris Sale just threw 160 plus innings out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. We don't know. The biggest argument I think Scott and I were making last year was that Cole Reagans in his 1.5 Tommy Johns was actually okay to throw over 150 innings. And he threw over 180 last year. And I'm going into this saying, go after the guys that when they are healthy are going to give me guaranteed quality innings, because I have no idea if the guy coming back from Tommy John who has a repaired elbow has a better or worse elbow than the guy who's been pitching for multiple seasons of 200 innings like Corbin Burnes. I just can't tell you. I want to say Corbin Burnes because he has been doing it, but I don't know. Maybe for the guy that has the repaired elbow instead.
And you can look at it. Another wrinkle in that regard is like at least Strider and Ohtani. I'm not sure about anybody else, but those two guys are also not just coming back from Tommy John surgery, but they're coming back from the internal brace procedure. Or Ohtani, it actually weirdly has not been confirmed what he actually had. They've been so cagey from it, but it's fairly clear it's something like the internal brace procedure. And so we have like no track record of that for pitchers, really. So it's a lot of uncertainty, but like I published my rankings, like an early look at my rankings on the newsletter today. And like the names that didn't make my top 48 at starting pitcher, it's like Seth Lugo, Luis Heel, Sean Manaea, Shane Baz, Kevin Gott, like guys who are names, like who had a lot of value last season or have had value in the past who just didn't make it in the top 48. That's 48 names. Like, yeah, think about last year when we were struggling to name like 35 pitchers that we liked.
I named 400.
I could name 35 pitchers. How many of them I liked is a different question.
Last year at this time, of course, I was all about the glob, this large, indistinguishable mass of pitchers somewhere in the middle of the rankings. And so at that point, I was taking a tack similar to Nick, where it's like there are so few differentiators at this position right now before you get into the glob that I'm not even going to worry so much about durability, because I just need impact wherever I can get it. But now I think it's the reverse. Now I think there is a large mass of indistinguishable pitchers, but they're actually good. They're all really good. Like Chris was saying, that the number of quality as I was going through my pitcher rankings, I was repeatedly shocked at how low everybody was. Like that guy needs to be higher. Oh wait, but that guy needs to be higher. And I could say that I've said before during the off season, it's like 15 to 50 in my starting pitcher rankings. I almost don't care how I rank them, because they're virtually indistinguishable. And yet in a way where I feel confident I'm getting quality. So that doesn't mean I'm going to go completely the other way and like, oh, it's all durability. I've emphasized durability too much in the past, but I'm not de-emphasizing it to the point I was last year, I guess.
I do wonder if we are maybe putting too much emphasis on these huge innings jumps, because we saw coming off the COVID shortened season, everyone threw around 60, 70 innings, and there were still a bunch of pitchers who threw over 150, 160, 170 the following season after that. So I know there's previous analysis that points out, all right, a big innings jump is probably bad for a pitcher. I wonder if it's outdated. You know, it's something I got to look into myself, and I don't want to downplay any research that anyone else has actually done on this, but it's something I want to look into, because I wonder if it's still as prevalent or a big issue.
Well,
as, like,
what I would say is it's less that, like, because there were, I think, more Tommy John surgeries in 2021 than any other season on record. I was reading that the other day.
That's
I think
true.
on Fangraphs.
It was after 2020. There was just so many more because they weren't trained properly.
It was a baseball prospectus piece. They had an anonymous pitcher who plays organized baseball. I don't know if he was a major leaguer or a minor leaguer, but he wrote a column for them, and he mentioned that there were more Tommy John surgeries in 2021 than any other year on record. So it was an issue for injuries in 2021. But the other thing is 2019, we had, I'm going to pull a number off the top of my head, 18 pitchers get to 190 innings, whatever the actual number is. Whatever that number is way smaller now. Frank, you might have those numbers in front of you. So I think part of it is just that guys coming back from big innings jumps are probably at a higher risk of injury than everyone else. But if nobody's throwing 220 innings anymore, the impact of 130 really good innings is probably a little higher for your team. Like your team is going to have fewer innings now than it did 5 years ago anyway. So we do have to adapt our approach and reconsider how 130 really good innings, you'd still rather have 180 really good innings. But the 130 really good innings are more impactful than they would have been last year, the year before that, because those inning numbers are going down every year.
Well, I mean, it's like the 180 is the new 200, right?
Yeah.
Which means then 150 is the old 180.
Yeah.
And this is also the interesting point about that. We kind of forget that like George Kirby and Logan Gilbert were not workhorses until all of a sudden they threw a ton of innings and then they were workhorses.
Pablo Lopez,
one, you have to have Pablo Lopez was like, I don't know, the shoulder and everything. He's going to throw 80 innings and he throws 180 or so. And then that's what he is now.
He's done it 3 years in a row.
Exactly. So what's also interesting is our perspective of what a heavy workload is really distorted now. Because there's two conversations. There's an actual volume of innings, and then there's a percentage jump. And when it comes to volume of innings, well, I'm hearing like Garrett Crochet throwing too many innings. This is wild to me. What the White Sox did is everything you'd ever want them to do to set up a good 2025. They literally say, great, you're going to pitch normally, and then it's just 4 innings. We're going to take care of you too much. So you threw 160. And that's great. Or actually underneath that, I think it was like 145.
Yeah, something 140.
Like, it's perfect. It's exactly what you want. And people saying, I don't know, too much of an injury jump because they're looking at the percentage. And the percentage is incorrect.
Well, his percentage was 0.
It's what people have told us we want. I'm not convinced, like back to how we got down this tangent. I'm not convinced that the whole innings increase from one year to the next means you're going to get hurt the following year. I'm not sure there's completely a lot. For me, it's more if you haven't proven you can take on an ace workload, given how high effort throwing is today, if you haven't proven you can take on an ace workload, I don't trust you to take on an ace workload.
That makes sense.
And one way I look at it is like Jacob deGrom and Sandy Alcantara Alcantara didn't throw any innings. deGrom threw 11. I don't even think he did a minor league rehab assignment. It was like maybe he cut through a couple, but so they're going from a super low baseline. But if Jacob deGrom and Sandy Alcantara are healthy all year and pitch like they're capable of, they're going to throw 180 innings. You can come back and say Jacob deGrom's not going to stay healthy for 180 innings. I agree. That's unlikely. But if he does, he can.
Right.
Roki Sasaki is someone that I'm very convinced there is no path to 180 innings next year. Just he's going to be on a 6-man rotation every time. Right. He's never going to throw with 4 days rest. He's never thrown more than 130 innings. That's the distinction for me.
Yeah, I get
which
that.
Which is building on what Scott said.
And I just want to emphasize, I hear about percentage a lot. So like a guy goes from 70 innings to 110, like, oh man, that's a big percentage. And it's not a thing. So at least how I think about it is the first year a guy pitches, generally what teams go for is about 110, 120 is what we saw from Alec Manoah and Kirby and Gilbert and McClanahan and so on and so forth. And then after that, the next season, they're kind of free reign once you hit that 120. Generally, when it comes to a first year, you can go up to about 140 or so. And then again, it's free reign after that. When you think about like Michael King switching from relief to starter, that was the biggest thing I heard was, oh, too big of an innings jump for this to happen. And I'm saying if you are a reliever through a year, that's strenuous. The number of innings, the volume doesn't matter. Are you continuously pitching through the year is what matters. And King showcased that he could do that as a reliever / starter with the Yankees. And what does he do? He turns into one of the most consistent guys in baseball after about May 23rd. It was unbelievable. He had a 30% K rate in 24 starts. Like, what? This is the new Aaron Nola we have right now. He had, I think, 200 strikeouts last year, which is crazy. And I'm absolutely enamored with Michael King entering this year because of this. So that's the mentality I just want to move away from. I'm not saying you guys say it, but I've certainly heard this percentage talk, and it's not about that. It's about the volume and the routine. And then is this a routine that sets up for every 5 days? One pushback I have for you, though, Chris, is that generally after Tommy John, you don't see 180. You do see something of like 150. They don't want to push him from 0 to 150.
I think has anybody ever done 180 after Tommy John?
Lynn
I don't know.
I think Lance
Lynn
Lynn
is just like, you got to rip the ball out of his
200.
hand. You know, you got to saw it off to get it out of his.
I thought the record was Verlander, and
Lance Lynn got to
Matt
186.
Harvey.
Okay, Verlander did push it. I remember that.
Did he have a late return the year before, though?
Lance Lynn, no. Lance Lynn didn't pitch at all in 2016, and then he came back in 2017 through 186. Okay.
Oh,
I would think for Alcantara and McClanahan specifically, those two guys, like, they will be protected more so than maybe DeGrom. And the thing is, I think the conversation is the same because of DeGrom. So I think 150 is like the cap for all three of those in my head entering next year.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll talk a little bit about the stats that each of us are using and how Nick analyzes pitching. It's a loaded question, of course. We got some news and notes and all that kind of fun stuff. We'll do that right after this. Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball. Today we are joined by special guest Nick Pollack from Pitcherless. He is here. What are you doing, Nick? I saw you dancing.
That was such a short ad break, and I was just making fun of the Masters. Oh, the Masters. Oh, yes, the Masters. Welcome. Let's take over baseball's second weekend from us. Oh my gosh, it's the worst. I hate it.
I'm sorry, Nick. Let's talk about something that will cheer you up a little bit, get you back on track. Look, you have dedicated your entire craft to analyzing pitching, and I give you a ton of credit because it's hard. It is really, really hard to analyze pitching, and I know you do all different types of things, from film analysis to looking at, it seems like, every type of micro-level stat that you possibly can. So I guess talk to people about how you analyze pitching, because I'm sure it's different than other people. And then I guess, like, what you recommend the general audience or fantasy players should look at. Like, what matters most when analyzing pitchers for fantasy? It
is so hard. I think the number one thing I will encourage everybody is to move away from your standard metrics that you know. Move away from the sabermetrics, the shallow ones, the ERA, the WHIP, the K per 9. Try to move away, because those are just outputs of inputs that we actually know, right? We know what creates those things. How do they get their innings? How do they get their outs? How do they get their strikeouts? And the answer is actually the pitches themselves. I'm very much of a person that needs to know, okay, he had this game, and is it because his fastball was good, his slider was good, his curveball was good? And making a picture of how this pitcher goes on the mound and gets outs, or he doesn't. What is it that's failing? And you can actually look on our website and Pitcherless. You can see this kind of stuff also on Savant. But what I actually made Pitcherless for is to get those exact stats in front of me as easy as possible, and to look at, okay, what are the strike rates of these? What are the ICR? That is the ideal contact rate. When this pitch is put into play, is it contact that is good for the hitter or bad? Not just barrels. There's also solid contact. There's also flares and burners. Those are good for hitters that pitchers want to prevent. So there are a lot of things like that, and I can talk a long time about it. But really, every single start, knowing the story of the pitcher, what they are trying to do on a given night, and then looking at Savant Game Feed. Actually, if you have PL Pro, we now have our own live tracker for every single game, so you can see the actual inner workings of every single pitch that they throw, which is really, really fun. It's what I use for writing my daily starting pitching roundup of every pitcher. So that is the biggest thing. It's really hard to do, but once you try it a couple times, go to your favorite player, go to your favorite pitcher, see their pitches, and like, oh, that's the highest swing strike rate. We have percentiles and averages for every stat, so you can quickly know, is that good or is it bad? And then you'll quickly realize, oh, he has a low ERA because, his sinker does not allow any good contact, or he gets all these strikeouts because, he has a 25% swing strike rate slider that he throws a third of the time, right? You'll quickly understand how he gets those things. And then you'll also understand, oh, wait, there's nothing that's good in this arsenal. Maybe this guy isn't actually going to last this very long. And it's so much better than your FIP, than your Sierra, than all of those stats, because those are just looking at all of these things that we actually have so much more information for. And so that's the biggest word of advice I have for anyone.
One thing I want to add to that is, like, you look at a team, I think the Mets are a good example of this with what they did with Shamanaya and who was the Severino last year. Like, this is clearly a team that, like, I don't want to say they don't care about results, but they're clearly looking at the stuff that Nick is talking about, the pitch characteristics individually, how they play off each other, and trying to build off of that. So that's one where, like, you look at the guys that the Mets are signing, Frankie Montas, right? He signed with the Mets.
Yep.
Clearly,
he's the most Met pitcher ever.
The first thing I thought of when he signed with the Mets, I looked at his arm angle has been dropping since his peak in Oakland. The first thing they're going to do, I promise they're already working on it, get your arm slot up. That's probably easier said than done. I'm not but like, because he's a splitter fastball guy, the first thing they're going to try to do is get more of that vertical separation between the fastball and splitter to try to get him back to what the best version of himself will be. And that's the kind of thing where, we can't say, hey, Frankie Montas should raise his arm angle and then he will do it. Like, we can identify something like that. Like, that's always easier said than done. But that's the kind of thing that the smart teams are looking at. They're looking at how the pitches play with each other, what the arm angles look like, and all that stuff, more than just, hey, he had a 15% home run to fly ball rate last year. That's going to go down. They're looking at why.
Yeah, so it's so funny you say that, because the Mets, what they did to Sean Manaea is they did the opposite. They lowered his. And that's also a really important thing too, is that everyone's going to be different what they need. Why it worked for Sean Manaea is because he had things that were lateral anyway, and he leaned into it. Then you want to lean into those things. With Sean Manaea too, it's also really hard when you have a low arm angle to be consistent in your location, and Manaea just got into a rhythm that I don't think he's going to repeat personally, but he got into that rhythm, actually being able to nail that sinker where he wanted to, which then made the sweeper a lot better on top of it. But for Montas, as Chris is mentioning, he needs to be over the top with that slider. He needs to be over the top with that four-seamer, which means he needs to be over top with the splitter and the four-seamer together to then mirror the entire thing. He's not working laterally. He's working vertically, which means over the top is going to help him more. It was actually interesting last year with the Brewers. I think he started to do that a little bit more. His four-seamer was harder out of nowhere. It was really fun. I was like, oh, man, you actually were dominating the four-seamer instead of just...
Yeah, he started getting a lot more whiffs with it,
Yeah.
So hopefully, that does come to fruition. But remember, every pitcher is different. Everyone has a different path to it. You just got to see what it is and then say, great, this is what you do. And then you have the deviation. Is it better or is it worse? Just have that initial foundation and it'll go so far for you.
And if people want to find some of those things, I would say, you mentioned obviously some of them. Baseballsavant.com is somewhere you could go. You could search up pitchers and you could look at all different types of individual pitch characteristics, whiff rates, expected WOBA, all those types of things. And they're adding more in terms of like IVB, like vertical break, induced vertical break, and all those things. And obviously pitcherlist.com. And I'm not just saying this because I use it as well, but if you go there and you search up like whatever pitcher you want to look up, you can find all different kind of stats on every single pitch and all these different kind of crazy things. It's intimidating at first, 100%. But the more you jump into it, it's like anything else. It's, the more you research it and the more you look at it every day, you just kind of pick things up and you learn from it. So
just hop on my stream in the morning. I'm starting to do these again, doing every single team rotation. 5 days a week, playback.tv/pitcherlist. I'm live streaming at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So I will walk it through with you and show you the process if you're trying to get into it. I literally made this site so I could analyze pitchers better. That's why I did this.
There you go. All right, let's talk some news and notes before we get into pitchers that Nick is higher or lower on versus early ADP. And there was, some little things that kind of went down, but might have some fantasy value. Some very recent things as recent as today. Some things from last week as well. The Orioles have made their big pitching move. Chris, you asked, and they delivered. They signed Charlie Morton to a 1-year, $15 million deal. Morton is now 41 years old, coming off a subpar season with a 4.19 ERA, 1.32 WHIP. The whiffs took a step back. The fastball velocity continues to drop off. He's 41 years old. I mean, these are things that we should expect. Scott, is there anything left for fantasy in Charlie Morton to Baltimore?
Probably not. And I say that mostly because the last 3 years in Atlanta weren't particularly good for fantasy. And a couple times I said, yeah, but there's still this going on with him that I like. And it just didn't pan out. What's weird about him, the way his decline has gone, because you figure, okay, 41 years old, of course you're going to drop off at 41. But it isn't the like conventional age indicators. You know, the decline isn't what you'd usually expect to see from a guy who's 41. It's mostly tied to control. You mentioned his fastball velocity dropped a little last year. It wasn't lower than it was like 4 years ago, though. You know, his velocity is actually held pretty steady, and his curveball is still one of the highest RPM pitches in baseball. He did lose a little bit of swinging strikes finally last year. His K per 9 dropped below 10 finally last year, but mostly it's just he stopped throwing strikes.
Yeah, I just think the command is bad.
And could he get that back, particularly with the change of scenery? It's not outside the realm of possibility, but I feel like I know better than to bet on it, especially in a deep pitching pool like we have right now.
I'm gonna make the same joke twice during this segment. Here's the first one. The Orioles rotation is oops, all number 4 starting pitchers. We'll make the second one later, but that it just still feels like
Grayson
they're at least,
Rodriguez.
Sure, Grayson Rodriguez is actually good, but everyone else is just a guy.
The offense on Nick Pollack.
Chris!
The point is, this is a rotation that badly needs another impact arm. And look, maybe Zach Eflin gets back to 2023. Or maybe Grayson Rodriguez takes a step forward because he's, I think, more good than great right now. He's one of those guys that, like, you look at the component parts, everything should be better. Like, the end result should be an ERA that starts with 3.1 rather than like 3.4 or whatever it is. And obviously the park's going to be a little less beneficial for everyone. So I still think Baltimore needs to make a big swing here somewhere. I don't know if they're going to, but they should.
They aren't. I mean, this is their big pitching signing, right? With Charlie Morton, the curveball is everything. And there were times in the past that the cutter was too, but really the last 2 years, we really have seen it as just curveball, four-seamer, and the four-seamer is just getting worse. And it's really hard to expect it to get better at this point, unfortunately. So I'm very much out on Charlie Morton.
Yeah, of course. The offseason is not over and they still could make a move. I don't think that it will come in the way of signing somebody, although, you know, they've kind of been linked to Jack Flaherty. I don't think that's going to happen anymore after signing Charlie Morton here, but could they trade for Dylan Cease? It's not crazy. Obviously they have the pieces to get it done. I believe he's entering his final year of team control. So that is something that could happen, but obviously has not happened yet. The Dodgers signed Korean infielder Hae-Sung Kim, not Ha-Sung Kim. I mean, this is going to take some time. Confusing. There's going to be a lot of confusion. It's Hae-Sung Kim, Hye, Hae-Sung Kim, to a 3-year, $12.5 million deal on Friday.
No relation.
At the time, Dodgers GM Brandon Gomes said the plan for now is to use Kim in a utility role with Mookie Betts and Gavin Lux still slated to start in the middle infield. And then on Monday, the Dodgers traded Gavin Lux to the Cincinnati Reds for outfield prospect Mike Sirota. Definitely not confusing either.
Also very confusing.
And then a competitive balance round A draft pick, which according to Jeff Passan should be around 37th overall. So, Chris, there are lots of moving parts here. I know you wrote an article. It looks like Hae-Sung Kim, who is will be 26 years old on opening day. It looks like he will be the starting second baseman for the Dodgers, I think. And then there are lots of moving pieces trying to figure out where everyone will play for the Reds. So what do you have?
I think it would be a mistake for him to be the starting second baseman, not because I don't think he should be a starter, although I think there's a lot of question about whether the bat's going to play. I just don't think Mookie Betts is a shortstop. And he was well below average in arm strength for a shortstop, well below average in range factor, OAA as well. I think it clearly makes more sense and would be beneficial for fantasy. I'll admit there's a little wishful thinking here that Mookie Betts plays second base and Hyun-Sung Kim, who was a Golden Glove winner in, I believe the KBO calls it the Golden Glove. He's the only player in the KBO history to win a Golden Glove at both shortstop and second base. It's a little bit of an Andres Jimenez situation where he's a playable, very good shortstop and an all-world second baseman, perhaps. And you should probably play that guy at shortstop. And I think the skill set offensively is pretty Andres Jimenez-esque.
There's a third lineup permutation for the Dodgers, potentially.
Well, yes.
And that's Betts moving to second, Tommy Edman coming in from center field, and Andy Paez playing center field.
Yeah, I can't remember who I saw, but one of the reporters said it's going to be like an open competition between James Outman, Andy Paez, and Hyun-Sung Kim, and they'll just put Tommy Edman wherever the other guys fit
best.
And it'll probably actually just be different every day.
I mean, and Kim is left-handed, right? He's a left-handed batter.
I think so. I'm not
so
sure.
there might be a left-handed, right-handed thing that comes into play, at least early on, until things sort themselves out. Mm-hmm. I don't have a lot of hope for Hyun-Sung Kim for fantasy. He could be a base stealer if he gets on base enough.
Yeah.
But there's not really any power to speak of there. Yeah. And he's not a contact hitter on the level of like a Jung-Hoo Lee, for instance. He's a pretty good contact hitter, but it's hard to make that profile work in the league as it is now.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, he had 11 home runs in the KBO last year.
That was a career high.
Yeah. When Hyun-Sung Kim came over, he was hitting like 30 home runs a year. And you see, he's kind of like a 12 to 15 home run guy in the majors. So
now the other permutation of that joke that I made relates to the Cincinnati Reds, who are following in my beloved Miami Marlins footsteps and building an offense around all second baseman. I tend, like, there's been a little bit of speculation that Gavin Lux could be like a utility guy for the Reds. He's a pretty mediocre second baseman and played his way off shortstop. And the times that he's played the outfield, I think has been pretty bad. It's been very limited, but I don't think he's a utility player. I think he's going to play primarily at second base, maybe a little bit of first, maybe some third, although that feels like a stretch. So I'm taking this as hopefully the Matt McClanahan center field experiment in Arizona went well. He only played like 3 games there, but maybe they saw enough and think he can hack it. Because otherwise, I don't know how everything fits together here.
Well, I presume Matt McClanahan would be a higher priority for the lineup than Gavin Lux would be.
I would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Gavin Lux is like a 700 OPS guy. I know he had better numbers in the second half, but that was really just like August, and then he fell off again in September. And there's enough of a track record there
in the postseason.
Yeah. So maybe you'd wonder if Matt McClanahan will stay healthy, but he played in the Arizona Fall League and looked healthy there. He only got 3 games in center field. He mostly played second base in the Arizona Fall League. So I assume this is stock down for Gavin Lux. It doesn't look like his power is going to play much better in Cincinnati. It doesn't look like he has much power. So it does obviously crowd things, but I don't think it's going to come at the expense of Matt McClanahan. Maybe of Noel V. Marte, maybe of some of the outfielders. TJ Friedel are more likely. I think they still have Jake Fraley and scheduled for a lot of at-bats.
Yeah. I will just say the reason I bring up McClanahan is just if they have other options, I just want to, like, I think people are still treating Matt McClanahan as if he's just like, we are certain that guy's a star and he just needs to stay healthy. And I don't think that's the case at all. He still has an ADP inside of the top 100 after missing the entirety of last season with shoulder surgery and then a rib cage fracture. So, like, I just want to pump the brakes on Matt McClanahan a little bit, just because, like, I think there's a lot to like about the skill set. If you look at the skill set and compare it to Zach Geloff in 2023, it's basically the same. A lot
not
of
as
chase,
exaggerated,
better plate discipline though.
But yeah, it's
the zone contact is a lot better than what Geloff was.
I think it's fair to wonder if Matt McClanahan was really everything he looked to be in 2022.
That's what I think. He's more. I don't think he's 260 hitter.
I think no matter how he comes out, it's better than Gavin Lux.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah, probably.
And then the other thing is he's not eligible at second base yet in CBS Sports League. So between both how this move impacts Matt McClanahan for the Reds and how this move impacts Mookie Betts for the Dodgers, neither of them is second base eligible yet, at least not in CBS Sports Leagues. And second base eligibility is the most coveted eligibility right now. Mm-hmm. So if this makes it more likely Mookie Betts gets second base eligibility, okay, stock up for him. If it makes it less likely McClanahan gets second base eligibility, I think stock down for him. But it remains to be seen right now, unfortunately.
I'll also just point out, I think the Reds basically traded their 4th round pick from last year and a 2nd round pick in the upcoming draft to downgrade from Jonathan India to Gavin Lux, so that they could add Brady Singer, who might be the worst possible fit for their ballpark that you could come up with among viable starting pitchers.
I wouldn't say that. He ground ball guy. Ground ball. Ground ball.
Just
homer fly ball rate, I understand, but fewer fly balls.
Well, that's for me. It's just he misses so few bats that a contact heavy guy like that moving to Cincinnati is just a bad.
I mean, I'm
fit.
not going to sit here and stand Brady Singer, but
I just. That tells that to me just says they saw 3.71 ERA last year, 3.23 ERA in 2022. Are cool rotation upgrade, and that feels like a bad.
By the way, I really appreciate you guys actually giving some names that are real, like Brady Singer. Finally, I don't know who those other guys were for the last 10 minutes.
I do have some lower level pitchers coming up, Nick. So get ready for some Trevor Williams and Michael Lorenzen analysis.
Let's go.
The Rangers signed reliever Chris Morton to a 1-year deal, and he has had a very solid career. He has immaculate control, 14 career saves, though he's never been a full-time closer. Scott, just looking at the Rangers roster right now, of course they can still make another move, but based on the way it's kind of set up, I would guess that Chris Morton gets the first save if they don't make it.
Yeah, but they got to make another move if they honestly view themselves as contenders. Chris Martin's turning 39 this year.
He's really good last year.
He can't stay healthy.
Hasn't been good since parachutes.
He's
I like
he's sometimes vulnerable to home runs. I don't think he's somebody a contender really wants as their closers. A bridge to the closer, great, but I got to think with Kirby Yates still out there, that's probably or Kenley Jansen or I can't Carlos Estevez. There's still a lot of proven closers out there.
Jack Leiter.
No, don't do that to me. Don't you dare take Jack Leiter.
He's their number 7 starter right now.
Don't do this, Chris.
I think he could be a really good closer.
There's another prospect in their system that
wrong.
Might also be another closer is Emiliano Teodo. So just pay attention to that name. All right, Nick Pollack is still here. Let's get some thoughts. The Nationals signed Trevor Williams to a 2-year, $14 million deal. The Royals re-signed Michael Lorenzen to a 1-year, $7 million deal. Nick, do either of those matter?
Well, I'm happy I'm wearing this shirt talking about Trevor Williams. I'll say that. But Trevor Williams, what he was really good at last year for a 2 ERA and a 104 whip was he had the best command I've ever seen from him, keeping so much of his pitches low and just barely putting fastballs inside the zone when he needed to. I think it's something we see often where a guy gets into a groove for a moment and then it goes away, especially with command guys. Everybody's a major leaguer for a reason. And if they get in that feel for a bit, they will just be at their best for a little bit and it will fade. I don't really expect Trevor Williams to be a thing for you to add at the beginning of the year. There might be a couple weeks, but yeah, you should be going after him.
Mm-hmm. I think streamer fodder for either one, Trevor Williams and Lorenzen. I will just point out with Williams, he went to Driveline Baseball last offseason, and he did start throwing his sweeper more, and it was a really good sweeper last season. So, of the two, I think you're more likely to stream Trevor Williams, but I don't think either are draftable in a 12-team league.
I'm going to tell you that it was only a 50% strike rate on that sweeper, which was just 13th percentile. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Fair enough. The White Sox signed Josh Rojas to a 1-year deal. I'm not going to ask you about Josh Rojas, just going to mention it. And the Red Sox, some notes there. Apparently, Vaughn Grissom is the favorite to open the season at second base, with Ceddanne Rafaela focused primarily on center field. And speaking of the Red Sox, apparently they are the preferred trade destination for Nolan Arenado if the Red Sox have interest, which we don't know. So
2 notes. One, Craig Breslow has said like 12 different times this offseason, Rafi is our third baseman. I think that's like the exact, he has like, there's like a button that he hits and that's what he says. He just keeps saying that exact quote. We'll see. Arenado to Boston is like the only chance Arenado has of being fantasy relevant next year, now that Houston's off the table. The other thing I will say is I did some digging on this Vaughn Grissom thing, and it was like one reporter said he is, quote, the nominal favorite to open the season at second base, which, like, I think it makes sense. Like, he was kind of the centerpiece for the Chris Sale trade. Let's see if he can do anything in spring training. But like,
it feels like his last chance.
Yeah, like if he has a bad spring and Christian Campbell's tearing the ball, but the cover off the ball, I think Christian Campbell can overtake him. Like, I'm not saying that definitely will happen, but Christian Campbell should still be on your sleepers list. He will be on my sleepers list.
Ooh, spoiler alert. Those are coming out next week, by the way. Chris will have sleepers. I'll have breakouts. Scott will have busts. So 1.0 for each of us of sleepers, breakouts, and busts. And rankings will be live on the site on Tuesday, January 14th. So make sure to check that out as well. Reminder, everything that's going on here, some programming updates. FBT is back to 3 times per week in January. We're actually live on YouTube right now. Thanks for everyone for hanging out. Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday nights, 10:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you want to come watch us live, that means you'll have an audio podcast in your feed every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings starting next week. Also, our 5-minute podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, has been rebranded as Fantasy Baseball Today Express. Slightly longer episodes, so more content for you, around 8 to 10 minutes in that range. So make sure to subscribe to FBT Express wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's take our final break, and when we return, pitchers that Nick Pollack is higher or lower on. We have like 20 minutes to talk about 11 pitchers, so that should be fun. We'll do that right after this.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Garrett's ball! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Welcome back in to Fantasy Baseball Today. Nick Pollack is ready for a fight. He's ready to defend his rankings, which are actually live on pitcherlist.com if you want to check them out. Took a look at some of those rankings and found pitchers that Nick is higher or lower on based on early ADP. 2 names that you were kind of in sync with ADP, Chris. Nick, your name is Nick. 2 names are Garrett Crochet and Roki Sasaki. So Garrett Crochet you have as your SP3, which is amazing. Very aggressive. I love it. Behind only Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens. Crochet is currently the SP5 in ADP. And then Roki Sasaki is your SP15. He's SP19 in ADP over the past month. And I used the last month because that's kind of when things started to ramp up, knowing that he's coming over and all that fun stuff. So, Nick, you've got, I don't know, like a minute or 2 to tell me why you love Garrett Crochet and Roki Sasaki.
Extension. That's the word. Garrett Crochet throws the ball super close to the plate at 97 miles per hour, and he has 2 different fastballs off of that 4-seamer that is at 97 that go in opposite directions. You have the cutter going underneath the right-handed bats at 92. Then you have the sinker that he added that had like a 20% plus swing strike rate, which you don't see from a sinker unless you have its absurd extension. And guess what? The one ding was that he was on the White Sox, and now he's not anymore. I don't care about Fenway. Because if you're an ace, you're an ace. It does not matter to me. I had him at 3. I'm not worried about the health or anything like that because they just set him up perfectly. And I expected him to be moved in this offseason. And what do you know? That's what happened. I'm actually kind of shocked that ADP followed because when we saw it at First Pitch Arizona, it was 51 overall for Garrett Crochet. And I had to go up there with Eric Smolsky and bat off everybody. Like, stop being ridiculous. He should be up here. And I think that he could be SP number 1. I'm that into him because I just feel you have such a good foundation. With Sasaki, I don't know. I see 19. That's fine too. I could push him all the way down to 25 if I want by my February rankings. I made my initial rankings the beginning of November. And to me, it's about him actually adding extension. all the way up to 7 feet, which is elite. That's what you want. 7 foot. Oh my gosh. That's like Bailey Ober and Logan Gilbert. Garrett Crochet is up there too. And he's past 7 feet. And that's amazing. Throwing hard with a splitter and breaking ball that works really well. But yeah, the innings cap is a little bit worrisome. It's just that when you get past 15 in the rankings, you start to lose some of the upside of a 30% strikeout rate with good ratios. You get 2 out of the 3 for the most part. And that's why I put Sasaki where I did. I might be pulling him down to like 20, 25 range. And I see ADP at 19. So I've got no real problems there. But I'm so stoked for Crochet. He's amazing.
He is amazing. And it's one of those, you're ranking him third, where it's like pretty clear. If you think it's too high, it's pretty clear why. If you think it's just right, it's pretty clear why. By the dominance indicators last year, and I'm talking outputs more than inputs, other than ERA itself, Garrett Crochet was like the most dominant pitcher in baseball by virtually every measure. It's just he was basically a starter for half a year, and it was the first half of the year. And getting back to what I was saying at the start of the show, particularly for a guy who was known for being unable to stay healthy before he joined the rotation, missed almost the entire previous 2 years with injuries. I'm not totally sure he can take on an ace workload. I'm willing to gamble on it at 9, which I think is where I have Garrett Crochet. So like, you know, I'm not saying I have to be sure you can take on an ace workload for me to draft you as an ace, but obviously the higher you go in the rankings, the more sure I have to be for it, because obviously that's what I'm paying for you to be a true ace.
I preferred the status quo Nick was talking about. I came back. I assume you were talking about at first pitch. Yes. When he was very controversial at like 13 or something.
I was like, what are you doing?
Loved that. What are you doing? He's 8 for me. So I'm right there with Scott, where I like him a lot. Probably not enough to draft him.
So it's just health, right?
It's basically. For me, it's basically just health.
Skills are as good as anyone out there. That's what I'm trying to get at.
It's not just health. It's we were talking earlier in the show, 150 dominant innings means a lot more than it used to.
Right.
But for the number 3 pitcher, I need 180, 190 dominant innings.
Sure.
And I'm just
not
sure.
So do you think that Skeens is going to throw more or fewer innings?
I have the same doubt about Skeens. I'm actually lower on Skeens than the consensus. I have more on Skeens.
I think
where are you on Skeens, Scott?
I think both guys have him at SP3, right?
Yeah.
Behind Wheeler and Skubal.
Wheeler. Yeah, Wheeler and Skubal, yeah.
Right, okay. So I guess what I'm getting at is you can, honestly, I'm probably not drafting anyone outside of my top 10 unless they fall to like 15 or 20.
Yeah,
that's
me
just,
too.
For me, it's not worth it. Hitting is so much more valuable in those rounds. But what I'd say is when it comes to predicting innings, I see Garrett Crochet going out there every 5 days. And I would not say that his health risk is higher than any of the other guys. So to me, it's about skills. And at that point, and like Crochets are just unbelievable. That's kind of where I see.
But why do you say that?
I get that Wheeler. I understand the Wheeler case because Wheeler's been really one of the only guys that can actually go 7-8 innings consistently.
What about Corbin Burnes?
Corbin Burnes is interesting. I debated this back and forth because for 5 months he lost his cutter and then he got it back in the 6th.
Right.
And it completely changed. It was a pitch that had minimal drop and all of a sudden a ton of drop. And he finally got the pitch low and that set up the other pitches too. I was so excited about it. If you read my roundups, you'll see me just get elated. All of a sudden the cutter's back and I'm shouting this from the top of the mountains. So I'm excited about that, but I don't know if I'm not as confident in those skills, right? I also, and I'm not going to just say that Burnes is healthier. I just can't because we've seen guys. Max Fried was one of them.
Yeah,
Garrett Cole was one of them. Shane Bieber was one of them. I can't just say that like he's going to be totally fine.
I think it's all
predict injury, but I mean, it's obvious there are some pitchers who never get to that ace work. Like they're just never able 100% with max effort delivery to get there. And Corbin Burnes has for multiple seasons.
Absolutely. I would say I'm saying there's a higher like a better chance for Burnes, but I'm not saying that Burnes is like, oh, I know I'm going to get it.
So like
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Every pitcher has a 40% chance of going on the IL any given year.
Right. Which is why I just go for this.
Corbin Burnes probably has a 30% chance of going on the IL. And Garrett Crochet probably has a 50% chance of going, like that,
whatever. Yeah.
Like whatever the specific numbers are, you can fudge them, but that's the way because like, so I go on this rant all the time, but we talk about
50,
injury.
50. Either they get hurt or not.
Well, that's the way people actually talk about it. And it drives me crazy because it's like, he's injury prone. He's not. Guy who's not injury prone. It's like, no, there's chances
you don't want to do single factor analysis basically ever.
Yeah,
and I get your frustration with that. But like Corbin Burnes is Corbin Burnes. Unless you don't think he's Corbin Burnes anymore.
Well, right. Well, he hasn't been. So like he had a 23% strikeout rate in 2023, and he had that pretty much all of last year until September when the
But he got it back, and he seemed very sure of what he needed to do to get it back and to keep it. And he managed to work around it amazingly well for not having it for all the months he did.
Right.
I think performance-wise, there's no reason not to trust Corbin Burnes.
I mean, look, I have Crochet at 3 and Burnes at 5. So, I mean, I'm not saying that,
I understand.
I will say, I have Sasaki 35th.
That's fine.
Which is, I think, mostly a reflection of, I just think there's a lot of good pitchers. And his velocity was down 2 miles per hour last year.
But it was down to 96 with
it was down to 96 from 90. But like, I think people are viewing, I think there's a couple things going on. I think one, people are just looking at like, he had a 2.15 ERA last year.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think a lot of people are just looking at that. But like the league ERA in Japan last year was like 3.04.
Oh man.
Or something. They are in the middle of like the dead ball era to end all dead ball eras. And he was not Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He might be similarly talented, but Yamamoto was a much, much more decorated, much more proven pitcher. And he's going, I don't know, like 6 spots in the pitcher rankings behind Yamamoto now. When we've seen like Yamamoto, it worked. Like he was a very good pitcher last year. He just got hurt. Right. I'm not going to hold that as much against him as Roki Sasaki, who also got hurt last year.
Yeah, that's a really interesting conversation. I haven't really had it yet. And I think there is something to be said about the thresholds of what is success in Japan versus in the MLB. And when I haven't watched Sasaki in the States pitch yet. No one has really. That said, from my understanding of the skill sets, Sasaki's is better suited to have a 30% strikeout rate here than Yamamoto. Yamamoto is better suited to limit walks and to be more of a 6-inning guy. So they both have their strengths and weaknesses. I think I had Sasaki higher because for me to be actually a top 5 guy and a potential, you have to have a 30% strikeout rate. And I saw that with Sasaki. I don't quite see it as likely, even though it could happen for Yamamoto. But I'm probably lowering Sasaki underneath Yamamoto. It just makes more sense to me of the safety of it, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I'm so curious. I don't know. 35 could be right. Like we're completely just, we don't know yet. I'm excited.
Yeah. I think I can't wait to watch him for sure.
Right.
Yeah. We do have to move on. Nick, you fit in perfectly because I said, let's keep things moving. We spent like 10 minutes.
He did fun.
That was a fun conversation. Everyone agrees.
Yeah, it was. It's just, we're not going to get to many other pitchers here. All right, let's go. Shane McClanahan, Shane O'Mac.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
For those watching on YouTube, you see this beautiful mug that Nick is drinking from as well. You have him as your SP7. Early ADP has him at SP35.
Yeah.
How could you?
I don't know. What am I doing? Look, I'll put it this way. Shane McClanahan was Tarek Skubal. Lefty throwing hard with a changeup that was deadly, and also Tarek Skubal with a better breaking ball. The thing is, obviously, he's getting Tommy John, and I think there's a massive weight we're talking about before the show about second Tommy Johns. And my thought process right now is I don't know what to make of it because our data on second Tommy John is somewhat limited, and guys are getting their first Tommy John far sooner than they used to. So we don't really have too many guys who are absolute young studs getting their second Tommy John. And I don't know if that means that this is bad or not. I want to think at times that, hey, this guy has a healthy elbow now. while other ones are ready to explode. And there is a Tommy John honeymoon that we've seen from a lot of pitchers as well. So the way I see it is, hey, this is Shane McClanahan, who was a top 3 pitcher in the majors coming back, and he's going to have a healthy elbow. So that's 150 innings of amazingness. I'm not going to put him above that because it's the Rays, and generally you shouldn't really expect more than 150, probably even say 140. But it's a different kind of impact than the other guys because this is one of the best pitchers in the majors. And I want that on my team. So maybe I am too aggressive on this, and I really tried to wrestle with the quality of inning versus the volume of it. But at the end of the day, I am certainly favoring impact more than, that was a steal phrase from Scott here, and favoring impact more than longevity because we have the massive pool of pitchers on the wire this year. So I put Shane McClanahan at 7. I know, crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like you're willing to sell out security completely. Like,
I mean, this is going to change when we see spring training, right?
What's that?
It's going to change when spring training arrives. Like, I'll put it this way: if Shane McClanahan looks like Shane McClanahan in spring training, where does he go to your rankings?
Yeah, that's a good question because what you're saying about his upside, that was certainly true in 2022. But when we last saw him in 2023,
he wasn't quite that guy.
Yeah, he was striking out less, walking a lot more. And maybe it was because his elbow wasn't totally right. But we're mostly basing the upside on that sample of that 1 year, which wasn't even the most recent year we saw him.
And when you look at 2023, it's worth noting it's a precipitous decline as the season goes
so
on.
This is what I that didn't ring right to me, and it's because I'm thinking of him until the middle of June, and then he got hurt, and then it was like he wasn't the same.
Okay.
Before that injury, it was a 2.12 ERA, 110 WHIP, 27% K rate across 15 starts.
The K rate was still down a little bit.
Still below your 30%
swing strike rate in that time, and that's not sticky stuff. I mean, that's him just being the dope of dope, right? And that's the guy I'm expecting to come back. Now, I mean, really, I think what's going to happen is spring training arrives, and we're going to know. And if Shane McClanahan doesn't look like Shane McClanahan or he's delayed or whatever, he's fallen way down in my range.
Here's a weird wrinkle.
What? I'm curious where he moves on yours. Yeah.
Here's a weird wrinkle for the Rays that I just thought of. They are going to be playing in a spring training stadium this year. They are not going to be playing in their spring training stadium. It doesn't matter. I just think that's weird.
That's pretty hilarious, actually.
I know there's a weird scheduling quirk with them too, which we could probably talk more about on another episode, but they're playing a large majority of their home games in the first half of the season, so that in the later summer months when it rains every day in Florida, they're on the road somewhere, which makes sense, but it's just, I wonder if there's just going to be more of like a fatigue factor. And
I do think there's a chance that Tampa is playing in like the most favorable hitting environment outside of Colorado in baseball. Because it's Yankee Stadium dimensions in the Florida heat and humidity. I think there's a chance that this is just an extremely bad play. And we talked a little bit about this before the show. We've mentioned on the show before, but the stuff metrics are better for pitchers at Tropicana Field than any other park in baseball. I don't know if it's hitters. We've heard, Willie Adames famously didn't see the ball well. There's evidence that the ball rises more at Tropicana Field than anywhere else.
Inch and a half increase in Trop.
So that you also have to account for kind of everything that we know about these Rays pitchers. Not everything gets thrown out the window, but like the environmental shift here is a really significant factor that I think could push, all the Rays pitchers down at least a little bit.
That's a really good point. I don't think I really take into account that it's going to be George Steinbrenner Field in the summer heat.
Yeah,
a decent amount. I mean, I just think about Dunedin a little bit there too. That impact. So that at the very least should bring down McClanahan into the teens for me.
And I also hope they don't trade Brandon Lau. That's my
who's that? I don't know.
I want to see him hit 40 home runs this year.
Way undervalued, but that's a different
does he
story.
Still have second base eligibility?
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
Oh boy.
We'll save that for Scott Sleepers 1.0.
I got to add him to Sleepers right now.
Brandon Lau will be on that list. Nick, 2 more names that you are higher on here. Max Fried you have at SP 17, Joe Ryan at SP 18. Based on early ADP, they're going about 10 spots lower in the pitcher market. SP 28 for Fried, SP 29 for Joe Ryan. As we've learned today, it sounds like you're a bit injury agnostic, so perhaps that leads to the ranking for both of these two, Fried and Joe Ryan.
I think so too. Yeah. I will say having a .99 WHIP last year, Joe Ryan is not getting enough respect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's why. Look, yes, a 360 rate. Oh, he allows some home runs. Okay, home run rate is actually the least sticky pitching stat among all the basic sabermetric ones. So yeah, no, don't worry too much about that. He also had a 27% strikeout rate last year. As Joe Ryan increases velocity, he also got more comfortable with his secondaries as well. Messing around with a sweeper in there also with that slider. I think Joe Ryan is just fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just an overall solid pitcher. Yes, he had that injury at the end of the year. All signs are pointing to him being healthy. I'm good with that. And then Max Fried does this lovely song and dance every year where it's like 4 starts until he actually revs the engine and goes. The only problem last year is that he got interrupted midway, so he had to rev the engine a second time, and that means his overall stats weren't as good. But this was even before he became a Yankee, and that's such a good scenario for him. I think he's potential for 15 wins here, and he's always been a ratio darling. So Max Fried, if you want to talk about like a safe, solid starter, Max Fried always fits the bill.
I actually agree wholeheartedly on Joe Ryan, and I was dead wrong about him last year. I had him on my bust list. I worried about how many home runs he gave up in previous years, but he upped the velocity. He threw his sweeper more last season, and Joe Ryan was really good. I just wonder if upping that velocity, maybe it contributed to the shoulder injury that he dealt with later on in the season, and so maybe he won't throw at that same velocity again this year. But
it's possible.
Yeah.
You never really know. Velocity is one of the weird things that we try to guess too, and that's honestly, when it comes to being right or wrong on a pitcher, I would say the number one thing, save for injury, is guessing velocity. Either guys all of a sudden have more velocity or all of a sudden they don't.
Yeah.
And like, well, I didn't know about that. So
yeah, that changes the analysis.
And it's fun because a lot of this stuff you got like, well, that was a good start, but we'll see. Velocity, it's like 4 pitches in. Oh, okay. He's just throwing 2 miles an hour harder. All right. Like, cool, great.
Those are the breakouts that we never see coming, and we can't really predict.
Yeah.
I mean, you can read about, hey, this guy went to driveline, this guy went to tread in the offseason, or they show up to spring training and, hey, their first start, with velocity readings, boom, this guy's up 2-3 miles per hour. Like, whoa, where did
Jack
this come
Flaherty
from?
last year?
Yeah, I mean, we just can't really predict those things, which, that it adds an interesting wrinkle to pitching analysis in spring training for sure. Nick, I'm going to throw.
I do podcasts every day in spring training just to do velocity stuff, and I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong.
Yep.
So good luck.
Nick, I'm going to throw 5 names your way that you are lower on entering this year. So give me a quick thought on each of these. Chris Sale, ADP SP7.
Oh, crazy.
You have him down at SP22. Blake Snell.
Guys, okay. Chris Sale, just really quickly, like, I know I might be like, oh, injuries are nothing. Like, there's no way. He didn't even survive for the playoffs. We all know that was like this golden moment that he had. He's not going to repeat that. He can't. It's like the same thing as DeGrom.
See, the one thing I will say is DeGrom gets hurt pitching.
Mm-hmm.
So does
Chris Sale.
I don't think
Chris Sale. No, Chris Sale. 2 of his injuries were.
Oh yeah, he also
riding a bicycle
and weirdness, and
yeah,
like
one was riding a bike
to his finger.
Yeah, and then didn't he have like a rib injury that wasn't from pitching, or was that?
But also
there's like a broken wrist.
Yeah,
and then also
I think the wrist was from the bicycle accident.
I honestly think Jacob deGrom's physiology can't hold up to how hard he started throwing the baseball in. What was it? 2019, 2020? I forget which year it was, but since then he can't even throw 100 innings. So he seems like the most overvalued pitcher of all. As good as he is inning per inning, you're getting 100 innings. I feel pretty comfortable saying from DeGrom. Sale, I'm worried about his ability to hold up, but it seems like more the bucket every pitcher falls into in terms of injury propensity. It's just he happens to have come up wrong more often than most of them recently.
We just saw like this career peak ridiculous season that nobody could have predicted happen. And I think the ADP is reflecting him to just be that again. I mean, not that. I'm saying like 90% of that.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't seem right to me.
I struggle with where to rank Chris Sale. I have him. Where do I have him? 5th or 6th, but I feel like it's by default and I don't actually want to draft him there. I just don't know where I'm supposed to put him.
Yeah, I have him 8th, so I'm
yeah.
I feel
like 22 is just like, I don't want to deal with it.
I feel the exact same way. It kind of feels like a respect ranking for Chris Sale because he just had this awesome Cy Young season, but this is the exact pitcher that you buy when his ADP was 133 last year, but then he has the Cy Young season and now his ADP is 38. So you probably want to hop off now that he just had an amazing season.
That is also extremely true of the next 2 guys on the list.
I'll tell you this. Chris Sale, in our most recent mock draft, he was there in round 5, and I was getting excited to take him. So, I think that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
I'll rank him where I rank him, but I'm probably not taking a pitcher until round 5. And if it happens to be Chris Sale, I'll be happy with it.
Well, that's the way I see about it too, right? It's just like whoever's there, I'm going to be happy about because there are so many. There's so many good pitchers.
Yeah. Well, apparently Blake Snell is not one of them. You have him as your SP23, and in early ADP, he is the SP12. Dylan Cease, you have at SP24. His ADP is SP10. And then 2 others, Framber Valdez, you have down at SP33. The ADP is SP16. And Hunter Green, you have at SP50. The ADP is SP25.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I got this. This is easy. Okay. Blake Snell, it's like we just forget. We take like some drug that makes us forget about the first 2 months of every fantasy baseball season. I don't know why. If you've ever rostered Blake Snell, you know what it feels like. And you know you never want to put yourself through that again. Okay? He just isn't consistent. And it's also every single year, Blake Snell has a different new skill that saves his season. It's not like it's just one thing that always it. There's a new skill.
I remember like 2 years ago, it was like he should never throw his changeup again.
Right.
And then last year, his changeup was awesome.
Changeup.
Yeah.
And then last year, it was like, oh, cool. My curveball is now going to be thrown for strikes. And yes, he is doing this very delicate tightrope of not giving in, not throwing meatball pitches. He has the lowest mistake rates. It's a pitch we have. It's that we have on our site. Double the chance of allowing a hit. He has the lowest percentage of that, which is crazy. But it's so hard to do that and replicate it with how he does it. And he doesn't do it for what bit. All of a sudden he just goes on a rhythm. Ages, whatever.
And it's not like he's not avoiding mistakes like Greg Maddux was avoiding mistakes, right? Like he's not like pounding the corner of the strike zone and like it's not command. He throws, I think, fewer pitches in the zone than any pitcher in baseball.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to push back on the command.
Or command versus control. What
he gets enough strikes to do it. He doesn't have control because it's not in the zone.
Yeah,
but but he does have good command. He's doing his tightrope because if you have bad command, you'd be too far out of the zone. It'd be too many waste pitches.
I think the real takeaway here, and it's kind of also true of Dylan Cease, is just we have a track record of how thin the margin for error is.
Yes,
for these guys.
Right. So Dylan Cease is a different problem. He has 2 pitches. He has a 4-seamer and he has a slider. He tries messing with all these other things. I keep banging the drum for him to learn a cutter because that's the solution to all of his problems. But no, he tried it once and allowed a home run. He's like, I'm done with this now. Great. Thank you so much, Cease. Well, I tried to help. Thing is, he's bad against lefties. He doesn't have consistency against them because his slider kills righties, his 4-seamer kills righties. But then against lefties, he doesn't trust the slider enough and he leans on the fastball too much. And fastball command isn't so good that becomes all of a sudden a disaster for him. He needs that cutter to get those strikes inside on them. He's not really utilizing that. And that's why you see the volatility all the time from Cease. When he's facing a lot of righties, then it's easy. But when he faces a lot of lefties, especially when he's not able to command his fastball that night and not really bury that slider down by the ankles of them, he gets hit pretty hard. And I don't think that's going to change. I think this is going to be the constant song and dance that we see from Dylan Cease of everything's great, everything's bad, everything's great, everything's bad. And I, again, just don't want to deal with that. If I'm getting a guy inside my top 20, I want the chance of that being everything great. I don't buy that Cease is going to find that rhythm he had in, what was it, 2022, 2021 at this point? I don't remember what it was with that glorious season, but I just can't, I don't want to put myself through that one. Framber Valdez was having a horrible season. It was the worst. I was texting Jason Collette being like, oh, you thought that Reagan's was worse. I don't. And then all of a sudden, the second half, Valdez found not only his old curveball, but like took his old curveball, polished it, and made it like one of the best curveballs in baseball. And it saved his season. I mean, you look at the whole season and go, oh man, this is really good under 3 ERA. He had a 4.3 ERA until like the 6-week stretch in August to September that just completely saved everything. So I hate that too. I really don't like guys who are not a consistent skill set, who all of a sudden go rapidly one way, then rapidly another, because they drive us bonkers as managers. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know if this is good or bad. And here comes Hunter Green. All right. Here's the guy that does the same exact thing. He throws that fastball. He throws that slider. Does he allow a home run? Who knows? That's it. That's Hunter Green. And I don't want to deal with that again. He is not going to have a 0.7 home run per 9 again in Cincinnati. That's just not the world he lives in. The splitter was bad. It was not the thing that fixed him. It was bad. It was just his four-seamer getting more fortunate last year for whatever reason. I dug into it for so long, and I'm like, it's the same pitch. I don't buy it. So I don't want to deal with it.
Only thing I could think of, and this is entirely theoretical, and I have no idea how you'd prove it, is just the presence of the splitter made it harder to get on the barrel of the ball. But like that,
see that
feels like finding a conclusion.
It was so not thrown. It wasn't like a 25%.
Yeah, no, he threw it 8% of the time or something.
Yeah. I just think that baseball's weird. We look at it in numbers, but like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I feel this was one of those good times, but now I just can't buy that he's going to do that again. So
what improved most for Hunter Green was quality of contact. His BABIP dropped over 100 points year over year, 339 to 237. He is a fly ball pitcher, and typically those are lower BABIPs, but not 237.
That would be more home runs than win it. But
I want to point out, though, it was real. Like, he got hit way less hard last year than he did the year before.
Oh, yeah.
But
like, he had one of the lowest expected WOBA on contact of any pitcher in baseball, maybe the lowest. The problem is it's almost identical to what Dylan Cease did in 2022 versus 2023, where he went from giving up a lot of hard contact to almost no hard contact. The strikeout rate and walk rate actually got a little worse for both Green and Cease in their breakout seasons. And then what happens for Cease in 2024 or 2023, he gives all the gains back in the ex-WOBA contact, and he has this disastrous season. I'm not saying it'll definitely happen with Green. It wouldn't be surprising.
Mm-hmm. I can't make a decision, and I don't like guys that I can't make decisions on. So I just don't do it.
All right, we went a little bit long, but we had to do it for Nick Pollack. Nick Pollack here from Pitcher List. Before you leave, Nick, why don't you promote everything you've got going on? I know it's
man. So come on by to Pitcher List. I write my SP roundup going over every single pitcher every single day of the baseball season. Also in PL Pro this year, we're going to be launching a live draft assistant where you can upload your team and have a live draft assistant with our PLV projections built in. It's a web app, not Google Sheets. So that'll be coming out in February. Go check that out. We have our 2025 projections with our PLV metric, our pitch focused metric, which is different than your normal projections and actually uses the stuff that not only pitchers throw, but the stuff that hitters see and how well they use it to make our projections. It's incredible. So go to pitcherlist.com/premium, check that out. But yeah, guys, I can't thank you enough for bringing me on. It's so much fun doing this. And Scott, who's the guy that we're most aligned on that we love? Is it Michael King?
I have Michael King 14, and I said at the top of the show it's 15 to 50 that I can't decide on the order.
Oh, nice.
So Michael King is the last one before we get to that.
Good, because I have him like 9. I love him. Go get Michael King, everyone. Okay, cool.
Yeah. There you go. You heard it here. The King of Kings. We are going to wrap there for Nick Pollack. As Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.